Today's journey begins, as many do, on an unnamed dirt road stretching off into a desert mountain range. Every so often, the subject of Area 51 bubbles up from the niche space it occupies on the internet to permeate the mainstream news cycle, and these first couple of months of 2026 have been no exception.
Are aliens real?
They're real, but I haven't seen them, and they're not being kept in, what is it?
Area 51?
Area 51. There's no underground facility.
Between this and director Luigi Venditelli's Bob Lazar film that's getting quite a bit of hype from the UFO world, many have been asking for a new base viewing episode, and you'd be in luck because that's exactly what I'll be doing today. I'll be making another ascent of the mountain that's come to be called Noname Peak, more on that later. But first up, I'll be tackling another viewpoint to look at a certain other dry lake bed. That's right, Papoose. I've articulated my position on S4 before, and to summarize, I'm in the camp of being skeptical of the facility's existence for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is the fact that there's already an acknowledged facility with the name Site 4 that's adjacent to the nearby Tonopah test range. But that's not to say my goal for doing these hikes is to debunk it. Quite the contrary, in fact. I would love for a story about an underground base built into the hillside containing 9 flying discs to be true. I mean, really, who wouldn't? Regardless, my interest when it comes to UFOs, or really anything for that matter, lies in what can be documented. Stories are exciting, but they really do little to move the needle of belief for me. Papoose Lake is a real, tangible place, and enough day and night observations over a long enough span of time should eventually lead to seeing something if those claims are true. This also happens to be one of my favorite areas to hike, so I genuinely don't mind getting out of the heat for a little bit just to stare at a dry lake bed from a mountaintop. I'm taking you up this dirt road that leads to a not so frequently traveled section of the Spring Mountains. We're near the southern boundary of the Nevada Test and Training Range, past Creech Air Force Base, but not quite all the way to the Department of Energy town of Mercury. There's frequent military activity passing through this corridor. We can see Reaper drones circling around close to Mercury as they line up with the runway at Creech to make their approach. This part of the Spring Mountains sees little traffic, and once we leave the highway in the distance, the odds of running into another person gets smaller and smaller. I'll be climbing Mount Stirling, which provides a view of Papoose Lake at a distance of 46 miles away. There was some confusion last time as to exactly which direction I was viewing the lake from, so let me clarify that I'll basically be directly south of it. I was a little bit iffy about the road conditions last time, but this trip I'll be driving up a little bit further to shave some time off the hike, since I'm confident my RAV4 can make it. It gets pretty rocky, but I have yet to find a desert trail that this little thing can't handle with the 2-inch lift and Falcon Wild Peak tires. Hell, I even went through the big washout going up to Kickapoo Peak a few days ago. I remember there being a small clearing in the trees further up the road with what looked like the remnants of an old campsite. There was a picnic table, a fire pit, and a really old rusted barbecue. That's my destination for now. It should provide a pretty good staging area for the ascent. All right, so before we continue onward, I do have something pretty cool packed in the back of my RAV that I got to show you guys real quick. Let's take a quick break and thank our sponsor of today's video, Electric E-Bikes. I'm kind of shocked that I was able to get an entire bike in the back of my tiny SUV camper like this. Check it out. This is the Electric XP4 folding e-bike, and it's perfect for the kind of outdoor adventures that I do, where I like to keep my setup small and minimalist. All I need to do is pull it down off my bed platform and it's ready to deploy, and now I have an expedition ready bike, just like that. The exterior of the bike is very robust, and we have some great features here, like a rear rack with 150 pound capacity, and even puncture-proof tires that come pre-filled with slime from the factory. Let's go ahead and hit the trail now and see if this thing can handle it. As you can probably tell, this road is pretty rocky, but the suspension seat post really helps smooth things out. This particular model has a 750 watt motor to give me plenty of power, and I can choose between 5 selectable power modes depending on how I want to ride. And it does have a range of up to 85 miles and a top speed of 28 miles per hour. Electric has implemented a proprietary in-house designed torque sensor to give me a great riding experience here. If I want to check road conditions before driving, I can just pull out the XP4. The fact that this thing can be packed away in small vehicles and deployed so quickly, it's honestly a game changer for exploring back roads and trails. So if you're looking for an absolutely fantastic foldable e-bike, go ahead and grab yourself a Electric today. Hit up the link down below to learn more and to get one for yourself. All right, so I'll be continuing on past the Burrow Poop up this little trail here behind me, stashing the bike here for now. And I'm gonna basically wrap my way around that ridge till I get to the summit of Mount Stirling, or at least the highest point where I can get a good view of Papoose Lake. So let's head on up. It's definitely an early spring here in the Spring Mountains. Super warm weather, though it's cooling off a bit as I climb up in elevation. Tons of greenery with everything blooming. Back when I made my first video out here, there wasn't a trail marked on this app or anything, but it looks like somebody's added it. Although I'm not quite sure I fully agree with the line placement, but it's close enough, I suppose. Hey, look at that, we have a couple of wild horses. I've seen tons of burros around up here, but I think these are the first horses I've ever seen up here. So that's pretty cool. There is a spring nearby, so I would guess they probably came up here to get water. Doesn't look like they like me too much. Passing overhead now, we have a Janet 737, one of the classified flights that fly employees to Special Access Program facilities, most often Groom Lake and Tonopah. This one has a call sign, Janet 15, and looks to be heading to Groom Lake based on ADSB. From here, we can now see out over the range. The really tall mountain back there is Bald Mountain near Rachel in Area 51. Crossing through the restricted airspace, we have a group of 3 Black Hawk helicopters heading to parts unknown. These flights aren't showing up on ADSB tracking, so I don't know where they took off from, possibly from Nellis. And here is Papoose Lake. I want to start with a wider shot to get some perspective. Now, I did do some contrast adjustment in post to cut down on the atmospheric haze that's present from 46 miles away, which had the unfortunate side effect of bringing out some dust particles there on the left side of the frame. I decided not to edit those out just so the slight blur doesn't look like I'm covering up any hidden entrances or anything. As mentioned previously, I'm looking to my north, and that large mountain in the back is Bald Mountain. You can even make out the Bald Mountain facility there on top. And the Papoose Range is right there in front of it, with the dry lake bed in front of that. Now, I shot this video before the S4 film was released, and I was interested to see what new photographic evidence was going to be presented to supposedly prove S4's existence. And, well, honestly, I wasn't particularly impressed with this aspect of the film. The new photo was an edit of one of Gabe Ziefman's aerial shots that had been cropped and selectively contrast adjusted until some vague squares appeared. I firmly believe this to be a case of pareidolia, and this is just as likely to be a combination of heavily artifacted Joshua trees and natural cracks in the ground. And you could basically make odd geometric shapes appear anywhere in the image by editing it in this way. Now, proponents of S4's existence allege that the hangar doors are extremely camouflaged, so I'm not expecting to be able to see a closed hangar door from this distance of 46 miles, but theoretically we should be able to see if one were open, and we can definitely see any ground activity that might be taking place, whether that's vehicles, something like the bus that allegedly would pull up to the hangars and drop off employees. Things like that would certainly be visible, and we can even see quite a few Joshua trees pretty clearly, so something the size of a bus or a truck or an aircraft like a helicopter would definitely be visible at this distance. So I'm definitely going to be looking out for things like that. One thing to keep in mind in regards to vehicles is that the tire tracks that are often pointed to on Google Earth aren't necessarily smoking gun evidence for S4, because there is documented evidence of people going out to Papoose Lake for unrelated reasons. It's not this totally inaccessible place that nobody ever goes. In fact, base employees have gone out there both driving and flying by helicopter. In fact, there is a really old audio interview with a former camo dude, which I tried to find again, but I couldn't, where he describes sometimes driving out there and running shooting drills. So that's one potential reason for tire tracks unrelated to S4, and seeing a white camo dude pickup might not be out of the question. Now, I'm about 95% confident that this small hill right here is where the film alleges that the hangars are, and this lines up with what I remember of the old photos on Bob Lazar's website back in the day. I could be wrong because of the flattened perspective caused by extreme telephoto, but I played with three-dimensional Google Earth imagery, and I'm pretty sure that this is in fact it. Now again, I don't think there would be enough detail at this distance to see any closed doors, provided they are camouflaged, but if one were to open and I happen to be observing the hill at the right time, I should be able to capture that, or at the very least get before and after imagery of the hill. I'll be looking around elsewhere on the lake bed and in the surrounding hills to see if I can spot any vehicles, aircraft, or anything else unusual in the vicinity. As always, let me know if you see anything I missed in the footage. Well, after observing for several hours until the sun started to get too low in the sky to get usable video, it was time to pack up and continue on to the next phase. I've done night observations out here before, and I may do so again, but I've got a lot on my schedule for this episode, so I won't be doing that this time. I do have several hours worth of video, and I haven't gone through every second of it yet. I'm currently still in the camp of being an unconvinced skeptic of the Lazar story, but I'm always a big believer in going out and seeing things for myself and gathering open source intelligence, especially on these hard to photograph regions of the NTTR. Repeated visits to this viewpoint may eventually lead to some footage of activity at Papoose Lake, and this will certainly be worthy of discussion and analysis. For now, let's head back down the mountain and see what we can find on the other side of the restricted zone at Area 51. All right, well, I'm gonna call that enough of staring at this particular dry lake bed for now. So I'm going to be moving on to the next phase of this journey and see if I can get to the bottom of this hill before the sun finishes setting. Wish me luck. As I was descending the mountain, I kept hearing a strange rustling on the trail beside me, and looking around, I saw two glowing eyes in the bushes. Turns out, this little guy had been following me the whole way. He ended up escorting me all the way back to my car for miles. I wonder if he knows where the UFOs are. Heading back down the trail in the dark, I'm making my way towards the highway and eventually up towards the town of Alamo. I'm planning on some early morning base viewing, but first, it's time to head to the Area 51 border to do some night sky recon. I'm meeting up with the awesome crew from the channel Project Fear, since they hit me up wanting to do some night vision videography of the Area 51 airspace a while back for their upcoming Area 51 project. I gave them a rundown of the thermal and night vision gear that I typically use, and they invited me up for a night to join them for some base adventures. Arriving in Alamo, I met up with them at their motel and took them out to one of my favorite spots in the Tikaboo Valley that's close enough to the Area 51 perimeter to sometimes get low-flying aircraft on thermals, but far enough from the main Groom Lake Road where the camo dudes are unlikely to harass you all night. Or so I thought. Maybe 10 minutes after arriving, the camo dudes were already giving us an unusual show of force. Immediately, a set of headlights appeared on the small dirt road to our right, and one of them even blasted a siren at us, which I didn't get on film unfortunately, but was something I had never heard them do before. After watching us from a distance and realizing we weren't the average tourists likely to be easily scared off, they greeted us with frequent drive-bys, sometimes with their headlights off. One interesting thing for viewers to note about the camo dudes is that even though they may follow you out on these dirt roads, if you flip the script and start approaching them, they will almost always retreat. See, what did I say?
That's so funny. Oh shit.
Yeah.
That's so rad.
The night sky proved pretty quiet tonight, and other than the typical evening Janet flights and quite a few meteors, there wasn't a lot of activity. No low-flying bombers or mysterious Doritos sighted this time. Getting eyes on Area 51 isn't as easy as many people might think, and the climb required is definitely strenuous, especially when carrying equipment and camping gear for an overnight. And visibility is greatly dependent on the weather. I've had what I thought would be a clear day quickly turn into wind and clouds that interfere with the view. My plan now is to take a couple-hour power nap in my car and start my hike around 4:30 in the morning, so rather than do an overnight on the peak itself, I'll do the hike in the dark, which means I can carry less gear, but it also is going to mean the ascent is a little more tricky. When most people think of Area 51 viewing, they think of Papoose Peak, which has been the classic, semi-well-known mountain with a base view at a distance of 26 miles. But for now, I'll be climbing a different mountain in the range called Noname Peak. Originally, this mountain was identified by Gary, who runs the Area 51 research website Lazy G Ranch, who confirmed that the peak did have a view of the base using viewshed analysis software. My climb last year ended up being the first documented ascent of Noname Peak, and I've since done 3 more climbs. I've started seeing a number of other explorers take on this climb as well, which is great to see, and it's now been added to some of the mapping apps that I use with a rough approximation of the route I took, shown here with a dotted line. The advantage to this mountain over the more well-known Papoose are that you don't have the weather station camera that the base uses to spy on you, and you also have a slightly different view of the base, with a certain area being visible that isn't visible from Papoose. Last year I was able to document the first imagery of this area where the Janet flights park, and even managed to capture the footage of passengers themselves exiting the flights here at Area 51, which is something that hadn't been captured before. And just my luck, there's been some rain clouds that have moved in and we're getting a little bit of rain, but according to the weather reports, this should clear up in the next few hours. Hopefully those are accurate so I don't have too wet of a hike ahead of me. If I were going to Papoose, I would drive straight through this wash, but I'm gonna pull over in this little clearing to my right and get a few hours of sleep and then start my hike up Noname Peak from here. The overall hike is only about 1.5 miles, but there's no marked trail or anything, so it's a lot of climbing over rocks and cutting through bushes. There's not quite as much loose shale as there is on the way up Papoose though, so that is the one advantage here. All right, well, it's about 4 a.m. and unfortunately the rain hasn't quite stopped as much as I would have liked, but working up the courage to head out there and start this climb. Should be interesting. Well, I've got, I think, about 1.5 miles or so. I definitely don't recommend doing a hike like this in this sort of weather, especially because it gets pretty steep towards the last leg and involves a lot of rock climbing. So it's going to be slippery. I have shoes with pretty good traction on them, so I'm not too worried, but I'm definitely going to be playing it pretty cautious. I am just hoping that this storm ends by the time I get to the peak, because getting all the way up there without any visibility is not going to be ideal. As I approached the summit, my hopes of better weather were quickly dashed, as what had been rain now turned into a blizzard. This is probably about the least ideal conditions one could be doing this climb in, so 0 out of 10, do not recommend. Whew. My best hope was to take shelter behind some rocks and wait for the sun to rise and hope that this storm would pass in the next hour or so.
Flash, request RTB through Sally Corridor and declaring an emergency for Hongyan for Snake 2.
Thankfully, although the weather conditions were less than ideal for perfect imagery, there was a break in the clouds. Let's take a look at Dreamland.
Left base, gear down, 3-2. 320 at 7.
The morning Janet flights are arriving, ferrying passengers from the terminal at Harry Reid Airport here to Area 51. Military and civilian contractor employees ready to work on whatever classified programs they may be assigned to. The RCS range section at the north end is visible, though not quite as good as from Tikaboo. We can see one of the antennae there, and the top of another one. We can see a truck of some kind driving out, looks like towards the back gate or Rachel Gate. That makes sense, considering that's the entry and exit point that most trucks seem to use. Some water tanks there on the hillside. Towering above Area 51, we can look at the Papoose mountain range, from the other side this time, and the Papoose mountain facility there on top. Here we have Hangar 18 and the associated support buildings. There's some movement near the Janet terminal. Looks like a fuel tanker driving down the tarmac. On the far south end of the base, I've been seeing several vehicles pull up to this hangar here, which is a relatively new construction built in 2014 to house sensitive aircraft. I wonder if something in there is being prepped for a mission. If you've made it to the end of today's expedition, I appreciate you sticking around. My intent with each episode is not to tell you what to think, but rather to spark curiosity about these hidden places in the desert and provide a window into them through the lens of my camera. Whether or not a particular facility houses saucers from another civilization or the next generation of human innovation, it's the mysteries that drive me. Every distant mountain peak adorned with various towers and domes, remote valleys with seemingly endless dirt roads stretching into the horizon, clandestine buildings patrolled by camouflage-clad guards, hangars containing things that may never see the light of day. Though I encourage everyone to evaluate evidence for themselves, I'm happy to give my opinion where it's warranted. The S4 movie was well produced, with fantastic visuals, and was a great retelling of the Bob Lazar story, so I give props to director Luigi Venditelli for the work that went into it. Personally, I remain a skeptic of Lazar's core claims for reasons mainly relating to his educational background and financial history. I have not seen enough evidence for me to overcome the hurdles and consider myself a believer. That said, the story is certainly compelling, and I honestly wouldn't even bother discussing it on this channel if I didn't think it was. There are other alleged Area 51 whistleblowers who I've never discussed and never will, simply because I find their stories pretty weak, and they often get basic details about the base wrong. Lazar, on the other hand, certainly knew what he was talking about with base operations, even before they entered into the public zeitgeist, with things like the Janet flights, EG&G, etc., which is why I personally think he did work at the base for a limited time, and likely created the story based on details that he overheard to impress his friend John Lear. As I said, that's just my opinion, and viewers are free to draw their own conclusions here. I'll link a couple of writings on Lazar down below that I find pretty interesting to read, one by Tom Mahood, another by Area 51 explorer and researcher Glenn Campbell, who's among my biggest inspirations for starting this channel. Glenn takes a more philosophical lens to Lazar's S4 story in his 1994 article, which I'll read a few excerpts from here. Maybe Lazar is a fraud, and maybe his tale is no more real than Alice in Wonderland, but that doesn't mean we can't learn something from him. If Lazar's story is fiction, it's filled with richness of plausible details and complex dilemmas you can't find in most popular novels these days. The Lazar story is far superior to most science fiction in creating a world that could be true. There's probably no better place on Earth to put a secret saucer base, be it real or fictional, than Papoose Lake in Nevada's vast military restricted area. Even if no secret saucer base ever existed in the restricted zone, just the fact that something this important could be effectively hidden here is disturbing in itself.